Between the time when the oceans drank Atlantis and the rise of the sons of Arius, there was an age undreamed of. And unto this, Conan, destined to bear the jeweled crown of Aquilonia upon a troubled brow. It is I, his chronicler, who alone can tell thee of his saga. Let me tell you of the days of high adventure.
Conan the Barbarian. This character has become a staple in the fantasy subgenre of sword and sorcery. Some of you may have been introduced to this character either through various comics published by Marvel or Dark Horse, or you know him from the films starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. But did you know that it all began in the imagination of a young Texas Cross Plains pulp writer? That writer is none other than Robert E. Howard. Born on January 24, 1906, Howard was born to parents Dr. Isaac and Hester Howard. They would move from place to place but would settle on Cross Plains. Howard was very introverted during childhood. Other kids would take notice of this and bully him for being different. Howard would find his escape through his love of reading, which started with his mother reading to him as a young boy. During his days in elementary school, he had a strong resentment towards education, saying, "I hated school as I hated the memory of school. It wasn't the work I minded. I had no trouble learning the tripe they dished out in the way of lessons. I wasn't at the head of my classes, except in history, but I wasn't at the foot either. I generally did just enough work to keep me from flunking the courses, and I don't regret the loafing I did. But what I hated was the confinement, the clock-like regularity of everything, the regulation of speech and actions, most of all the idea that someone considered himself or herself an authority over me, with the rights to question my actions and interfere with my thoughts." As Howard got older, he took on bodybuilding so the bullies would leave him alone. And it worked. Howard decided at an early age that he wanted to be a writer. He would try to get a job in the pulp magazine business while he continued his education at Brownwood High School.
Howard grew up in a world of words. He probably learned to read by the time he was 2 years old. His father was very much into books, all kinds of philosophy, theology, history, everything. So Robert, like I said, he just grew up in a world of words. He had books from the very beginning.
The people that know him on that level think he's a real nice boy, very pleasant. But then as soon as he's out of earshot, they wonder, what's he doing with his life? And Robert was a sensitive enough man that these questions didn't have to be hurtful. They didn't have to be mean or specific to elicit a real negative response. And of course, you know, the answer to the question is that Robert was making a living as a writer, and he was making a comparable living to what anybody else in town was making. And so that's the real disconnect between how the town saw him and how he saw himself. And so I think part of his defense mechanism was to create a certain sort of an outsider persona. And if they think I'm crazy, I'll show them how crazy I can be. But I think it's a genuine and a general, really specific Robert didn't have the kind of acceptance that we might have today, or at the time that another degreed man might have. It would be possible for a doctor's son, father or a lawyer's mother to be proud of them for their accomplishments. Robert didn't have that. And in the end, I think Robert had to get his validation from other places because he wasn't going to find it in town.
After finishing high school in 1924, Howard enrolled at the Howard Payne College in Brownwood, Texas. Howard would begin to show early signs of self-destructive tendencies such as chronic sleepwalking when he attended. Howard would find success in the newly published pulp magazine titled Weird Tales. 3 of his stories would be published by editor Farnsworth Wright. At the end of Howard's semester at Brownwood in 1925, he returned home to an oil boom. Unable to sell more of his writings, he worked multiple jobs, none of which made him happy. He got so depressed he would quit writing for a while and worked for a local drugstore. In the autumn of 26, Howard returned to college to study bookkeeping. During this time, he began to write poetry as a hobby. In the summer of 1928, Howard made a promise to his father that if he couldn't make a living as a writer, he'd settle for a regular occupation. Howard would find commercial success in a story he published titled Red Shadows, which featured the debut of a beloved character named Solomon Kane, a God-fearing Puritan who takes matters into his own hands whenever he sees injustice done. Howard would remain a regular on Weird Tales magazine for the rest of his life. Howard would go on to create other fantasy characters such as Bran MacMorn, Elborak, and Cull of Atlantis. Most famous creation would be that of Conan the Barbarian, a character who has been in pulps, comics, movies, and even video games. When he got in his 20s, Howard would date a young schoolteacher named Novelyn Price. Though not everything lasts forever, Howard would be burdened with expenses trying to take care of his aging mother. This would cause him to go through stages of depression. Howard would also break up with Novelyn due to accusing her of dating a best friend behind his back. On June 11, 1936, Howard would hear of his mother possibly never regaining consciousness again as she slumbers into her coma. Depressed, Howard commits suicide by shooting himself with a gun in his car. As time went by, Howard and his works would be remembered across the world. To this day, he has fans everywhere who enjoy his characters and respect his legacy.